Hey, what's up YouTube? Goratha here. So today I'm going to talk about the Lightning Arrow Champion build. This is the build I league started with last league, and I've been asked a lot of questions whether or not it's viable this league in 3.22. It was honestly one of the best league starters I've ever had, and I can recommend it again. There were some changes which I'll talk about in this video, and some changes to the gear that I would recommend. But honestly, majority of the build is exactly the same. Like for example, the passive tree is exactly the same. And for that reason, I will be posting the other video in the description below, and it'll be a lot more thorough than this video, and almost everything in that video is still relevant. And let's get into the changes. So Vengeance Cascade is being removed. This is probably the biggest change, and it's like, it sounds bad, and it is bad for the endgame, but it's honestly fine. I tested it in Standard, and it was not as noticeable as I thought it would be for single target. The clear speed obviously suffers a little bit because you're not hitting as much. Like on the return hit, monsters were dying as well, which helped a bit. It sucks, but the build's still completely viable and still a very strong build. They're adding a couple new gems. One gem they're adding is called Volatility. This gem has a bunch of top end, more damage added, with the downside of having less minimum damage. This works really well with lightning damage because the range is so high already that the minimum damage is already super low. And it'll work very well with things like Voice of the Storms. Voice of the Storms is the Breach unique amulet, which gives you lucky lightning damage. Lucky lightning damage basically rolls the damage range twice and takes the higher value. This will be a good option until you go to endgame. Now, originally in the last video and the build before, I recommended going Abyss items. It's still a good way to go about it, but I feel like it might just be better to go for Omni instead. Omni is probably a little more expensive, but it'll probably just be a better build. And to be honest, the Abyss build was a little hard to set up anyways, because you needed a lot of res on gear, and it was kind of hard to fit in the res, the attributes. It was kind of a lot. It could work, but it was kind of hard to set up. So I do recommend maybe just going Voice of the Storms non-crit, and then eventually switching into like an Omni crit type build. This is more of a Trey League thing, and I think the Voice of the Storms precise technique, this will easily clear all the pinnacle bosses, for sure. I did the pinnacle boss on a 5-link without Vengeance Cascade, so that is very solid. If you want to do like Ubers though, I think you have to go like Omni. They're also adding a new gem called Returning Projectiles. This is basically Vengeance Cascade with a damage penalty. It sounds bad, but it actually might be worth using for clear speed. I'm not quite sure if this is worth using 100% of the time yet. It might still be worth replacing a gem link with it because it does help the clear speed, and it is a single target increase, like 40% more damage basically if your return projectile is hitting. But yeah, I think the more interesting gem actually might be Volatility, just because you're increasing your top end by so much that your shocks are going to be a lot better. The end game is going to be weaker because you're losing Vengeance Cascade, but to be honest, like as a league starter, you didn't really have that right away anyways, and like I said before, this was one of the best league starters I've ever had. Early game was amazing. Early mapping was crazy good. Once you got Perseverance, the build flies. One thing to talk about, and one thing I'll mention, is a lot of people don't like weapon swapping. I don't think it's a big deal. Like I said in the previous video, it's a couple button presses every 20 seconds, and you have a big damage buff. You could go about this by just not weapon swapping and using Tanyu Ahis. This is a way to go about this as well. There's a couple glove options. My build uses Thunder Fist, which is a bit of a rare item, so it might be hard to get this anyways on league start. So you could go for a different option, like Tanyu Ahis is very good. You won't have the weapon swap. You'll get Onslaught. Chrome Spirit could be really good. You usually want to run Chrome Spirit with Vol's Vision. This would be a good option to get Rage. This could be a very solid option, and you can run Berserk as well. There's a couple options there, and you have some choices, basically. Now, I do want to talk about losing Crucible. I removed the Crucible passive from my bow. The damage loss was pretty significant, but we might be getting a lot of damage back from tattoos. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out yet, but it's all a 15% damage loss from the Crucible bow. With that in mind, I do recommend for a single target to use Artillery Ballista. This is probably the way to go until you get Omni. Once you have Omni, you can probably actually drop the Artillery Ballistas for the Mana Forge setup. Before I was using Mana Forge in my gloves with Burning Arrow. It's a little bit worse now because we don't have Vengeance Cascade, and yeah, I think it's Artillery Ballista is kind of hard to beat now. The main thing to keep in mind with Artillery Ballista is you do not want Point Blank. Point Blank reduces the damage because the way the attack works is it shoots projectiles into the air. And that's actually travel distance, so on the way back down, it'll reduce the damage. Early in the game, though, point blank is pretty good before you start doing that. And those are the main changes I would say. Like I said before, I'll be posting the last video, in the description below. I want to keep this video nice and short, so you guys can just see all the big changes that I think are worth looking into. This will be a very solid league starter, and I hope you guys have a good league start.